Well, good morning. I don't know how much introduction that we need, but I'm currently a pastor. I started my ministry career right out of college in an organization called Young Life, working with students. Went to Fuller Seminary and have 2 degrees from Fuller Seminary. Started in a doctor of ministry program, just as Greg, I think, is probably leaving Fuller Seminary. But then I've been pastoring for a number of years, so I've kind of have a long experience of working in a mission like Young Life, outreach, with all that goes into that, and then pastoring a church. So try to bring both of those together when I can. One of the guiding principles that all of this is going to be built around is what I call my 80-20 rule of ministry. And that is, ministry is 80% invisible. That one of the mistakes that we make, if you're in a church, you begin to feel like everything revolves around Sunday and you've got to pull off a great Sunday. And so somehow it's just about, if we're not careful, it's about the show. It's about doing Sunday. If you're in a mission, there's always a point where everybody gathers. There's always a point where everything comes together, and everything can point to that. And so my thought is that who you are in Christ is more important than anything you do. So I've had one fundamental fear in my life and ministry, and that is that I would get good at my job and leave Jesus behind. That I would get good at pulling off church, or I would get good pulling off Young Life, or whatever it is that I'm doing, and somehow leave Jesus behind. And then I would get to the end of my life and I would realize, wow, I got pretty good at the job, but where was Jesus back there? And I never want to do that. I want to finish as on fire for Christ, more on fire for Christ than when I started. I had a mentor. His name was Bill Starr. He was one of the presidents of Young Life. He just died recently at 93 years old. I was sitting with him when he's 92. We sit down in chairs to talk together, and before I realized it, he pulls up his Bible and he says, "Larry, let me tell you what I was reading this morning out of the book of James. It just hit me. I don't know why. I've never seen it like this before." And he's so excited, telling me how the Lord spoke to him through the scripture that morning. And it was a reminder of me that that's how I want to finish the race. I don't think I'll get to 92, but if I did, I wanted to be just as passionate about what the Lord's teaching me that day as any other point in my life. And he was my mentor in that. So who you are in Christ is more important than anything you do. You can fool people, but you can't fool Jesus, right? And then your planning and your preparation will determine the effectiveness of the 20% that everybody sees. Now you can do a 70-30, I don't care what the numbers are, but what I'm trying to help us understand is that we need to really understand what it means to have Christ first in our lives, to build our lives around who He is in our lives, and then to understand how important preparation and planning are. So there's a great business instructor in the United States who died some years ago, Peter Drucker, and one of the things that he used to say is that you are perfectly planned for the results that you're getting. And so if you don't like the results, go back to your planning. The problem may not be the goal. The problem may not be what you're trying to do. The problem is likely to be in your planning. And I've seen more people in ministry fail because they never learned how to plan. They never learned how to prepare for what they were doing. So here's preparation. I went to one of my seminary professors years ago, and I was exhausted, and I was feeling burned out, and I was feeling sorry for myself. And I sat down with him, and I started telling him, all of my troubles, and how hard ministry was, and all of these things. And he listened to me for about 45 minutes, and then he said, "Okay, Larry, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, and for the next week, I want you to get 8 hours of sleep every night. And then come back next week and let's talk." And I'm thinking, this is one of my favorite professors. And I was thinking, that's the best you've got? I mean, I've just bared my soul to you, and what you tell me is go home and get 8 hours of sleep every night for the next week and come back. But I went back the next week and I said, it's a miracle. I feel so much better. And it was such a great lesson for me to really think about, how am I preparing myself? How am I preparing my heart and my body, for ministry? How am I thinking about that with my family? And then learning how to plan. So with that in mind, I want to jump. We're going to have 3 principles. I hope we'll get to them. But the first one is biblical context. And for me, that comes out of Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. And it has this, have this in mind among yourselves, have this mind, have this attitude, have this perspective among yourselves. So collectively, as body of Christ, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the very form of God, or you could say he was the very essence of God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, be clung to, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant and being born in the likeness of men. So just take a quick second and think about Jesus, that Jesus was the very essence of God. He experienced the glory of God. He had been eternity with God. Jesus was part of there at creation. All of those magnificent things we know about Jesus. And he did not consider that something to be grasped or clung to, but he emptied himself of all of that glory to become a man, to become a servant, not just a man, but become a servant, to become a slave for us, for our sake. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So let me just say this, that what Jesus did is he emptied himself of his glory. He came as a servant, and then he humbled himself. And I want to challenge you with this idea that a friend of mine, pastor, years ago told me, Larry, never pray, Lord, make me humble. Pray, Lord, humiliate me so I might be humble. And that'll make you pray different, right? Lord, humiliate me so I might be humble. That Jesus allowed himself to be humiliated on the cross for our sake. That he didn't consider his own place. He didn't consider his own glory. He didn't consider that above our need for a Savior. He humiliated himself. He became obedient to the point of death. And then we have this great contrast. Jesus empties himself. He allows himself to be humiliated. And then it says, therefore, and you're all Bible scholars, so you know therefore always points to what you just read. And so he says, therefore, God... Notice this, God has highly exalted him. It doesn't say, therefore, Jesus highly exalted himself, but therefore, God the Father highly exalted him and bestowed on him a name that is above every name. So at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So we have this great contrast. Because Jesus was willing to empty himself, because he was willing to be humiliated, because he was willing to be obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross, God exalted him. Jesus didn't have to exalt himself. That what Jesus did was to be obedient to the cross, and God took care of the exaltation. And so I just want to give you this idea as you think about leadership, is that what God has called us to do is to follow Jesus. And if we're really going to follow Jesus, then it means to follow him in humility, to be willing to be humiliated for the sake of the kingdom. That whatever he calls me to do, I'm not above it. And sometimes in ministry, to get a title is a really good thing. To get recognition is something that we really strive for. To be recognized, noticed, appreciated, affirmed, all of those things are things that really draw us. You probably didn't get into the ministry for the money, so you don't keep score that way. You keep score sometimes by recognition, by affirmation, by those kinds of things. And Jesus gave all of that up, but God took care of that. And here's my theme for my life is that if I'm in Christ and he is at the highest place, then where am I? I'm already as high as I can ever get because I'm in Jesus. 2 other quick things. There are challenges, I think, loving God's word and strength through prayer. This always gets on my list because I was struck one time having a conversation with a pastor of a very large church who spent 30 hours a week in sermon prep. That was kind of his job description. Big time, expository, well-known, all those things. And he told me that he doubted if he would ever have a devotional time if he wasn't preparing a sermon. And that was really, had kind of eaten up his whole life, his devotional life, everything was all about preparing a sermon, and it just struck me that I never wanted to do that. And so not just, sometimes we read the scripture because we're being faithful, but the goal is to read the scripture because we love God's word, right? And to somehow try to keep that fresh, and then strength through prayer. Here's one of the things that I do in our church. We have 2 elders meetings a month, and the first one is a business meeting, and the second meeting every month is a prayer meeting. And so when you become an elder at our church, you get a prayer mat that I go to the hardware store and I buy a little gardening foam mat and I give those to them, and you bring your mat every month to my office, and we all get on our knees for 2 hours and we pray. Because my conviction is that prayer is often for us the prelude to get to the important stuff. So somebody open in prayer, and then we can get to the business, we can get to the really important stuff. And what I'm trying to communicate to our elders is that prayer isn't a prelude, it is the ministry. It is critical to what we're doing. And so how do you do that? You got to model it, you got to live it out. So to the person, every time somebody rotates off our elder board, the thing they miss the most is the prayer meeting. And so what we've done now is about once a quarter, couple times a year, something, we invite all the former elders back, and we have a large 2-hour prayer meeting. They all bring their prayer pads with them, and we spend 2 hours together in prayer. But just trying to lift up that idea that our strength comes through prayer, that prayer isn't just the prelude to get the important stuff, but prayer is the important stuff. And how do we model that in our churches? And I'm really grateful. The other thing that happens is that those men, when they finish being elders, they're so close because we've prayed for each other and their families. And we have a time of confession in our prayer time. And so these people know each other intimately after 4 years on our elder board. And so that becomes a really critical part. Okay, here's principle 2, mission and vision. So let's say you want to be a disciple-making ministry, disciple-making church. Do you know what your mission is? Have you decided what the mission is? And our mission or purpose, you can call it the purpose, will tell us why we exist. And so maybe it's Matthew 28, that the mission of our church is to everywhere we go, we make disciples, teaching them all that Christ has commanded, and baptizing in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, that's our mission, and we want to be that kind of church. And the idea behind a mission is that a mission doesn't change. The vision, what that will look like in our church, that should change periodically, and that's a little bit different, but what's the mission that drives us? So here's what that does for me. We have a mission statement that we're equipping every generation to love God, love one another, and love the world. And the reason that part of that is that I think everybody in my church can remember love God, love one another, love the world. And so if you walk into the church and you say, hey, what's North Bible Church about? Most of those people would say, if they've been there a while, they would say, well, it's easy. It's to love God, love one another, love the world. And that won't change, and we're going to stay after that. But maybe for you, it's make disciples. What's the mission that drives you? And then what this does for me is it keeps me focused. It keeps me on a true north, scope that we have a mission that we believe God's called us to. It also helps me as a leader that if there's something or someone that is pushing us away from our mission, then I need to correct that, because the mission is the critical thing. If you think about the Gospels, Jesus was always clear on mission, right? He said that I came to seek and to save the lost. I came to give my life as a ransom for many. That all of the adulation of the crowds, all of those things that happened, none of that would detract Jesus from his mission. He was always clear about his mission. And there are so many things that we can do and so many things that there, so many good things that we can do that sometimes we struggle to figure out what's the best thing that we can do. What's the thing that God's called us to? What's the thing that God's equipped us to? And so we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go. And then the other is, what is your vision? And that's a compelling picture of the future. So if we take our mission, if our mission is to be disciple makers, then the vision says that we're going to start micro groups and we're going to start community groups and we're going to, and what's that going to look like in the next 5 years? We want to have 70% of our church that's involved in some kind of discipleship group, and but you begin to paint a picture of what that looks like. But if you're living in a city that the demographics are changing, that circumstances are changing, that the staff changes, whatever it is, that your vision may have to, I kind of think that if you're going to be effective, you sort of have to reinvent yourself every 5 years because things change so much around us. The culture's changing. How do we address that? But our mission doesn't have to change. Does that make sense to you? All right. So stop me if it doesn't. So don't confuse your vision with your purpose or your mission. Visions can change. Your purpose and values should be permanent. The goal of any visioning process is to arrive at a shared vision. So there's an old saying that people own what they help to create. People own what they help to create. And so when we involve other people in that process of where are we going, what's God called us to do, there's a lot more ownership. If I kind of come down from on high and say, here's what we're going to do, here's our vision and our mission and our direction, then I'm constantly trying to sell it. But if I have people around me, with me, that are helping form that, they're going to be owners, they're going to sell it, they're going to help encourage other people to be part of it because they have ownership in the process. Okay, I'm going to keep, all right, unless somebody stops me, I want to keep moving forward because we'll come back to some of these things more specifically. A good vision statement. If you want, again, think about discipleship, think about discipling in your ministry. It emerges from core values. So for us, one of our core values would be who you are in Christ is more important than anything you do. So I don't want you just to get good at small groups, or I don't want you just to get good at preaching or leading third graders or whatever it is. But I want it to come out of your love for Jesus. I want it to come out of your passion. Here's another core value of mine personally. Is that so young people come to me and they want to be the next great preacher. And my standard line is, I'm only interested in someone that's just as willing to clean a toilet as they are to preach a sermon. So my wife and I, when we first bought the building that we're currently in, we decided to save some money. We wouldn't pay people to come clean our church, but we would do it with volunteers. And so I hate asking people to do something that I'm not willing to do. So we got a little small group of people and we cleaned the church every Monday night, once a month. It was our turn to clean the church. So I cleaned the toilets, we did the floors, we did everything. We cleaned the whole church with our group. And I just felt like, you know what, that's a value of mine. One value is I don't like to ask people to do something I'm not willing to do. I'm not too important, I'm not too grown up, I'm not too old, I'm not any of those things, but I'm not going to ask people to do something I'm not willing to do. When we started digging wells in Guatemala, I felt like I need to go dig a well with a team because I don't want to sell stuff. I don't want to ask people to do something I'm not willing to do. We cleaned the church. We did this for, 5 or 6, 7 years, something like that. And then we rotated, groups in. But that's a core value of mine, that we need to be willing to be servants in all kinds of areas and not just, I'm going to serve by being the, lead pastor or the preacher or whatever it is, but we're willing to do whatever. That our vision is grounded in the mission, that the mission drives our vision, that it paints a picture of a desired future state where we're going. If you have a vision that we're going to be disciple makers, why is that important? Why does that matter? Well, it's the Great Commission. Christ commanded us to do it. If we're going to be obedient to Christ, if we're going to be faithful to Christ, then we need to then we need to all sign up. But what will draw? Is it? I'm not going to get his Ramez that spoke this morning, talking about we're ambassadors for Christ, that Christ's love compels us to be reconcilers, to share the gospel. A vision should be something that compels us, that we do it out of love for Christ. It needs to be memorable, it needs to be understandable, and it needs to inspire action. Here's the mistake that we make often, I've made. I'll just speak for myself. That we invite people into ministry, we invite people to serve, but then we don't tell them what to do. We invite them in and, hey, we want you to be working with 12-year-old boys. But if you're inviting people in, you should always have the next step. Hey, I want you to pray about, I want you to consider helping us work with the young boys in our church, and we're going to have a meeting Tuesday night to prepare and to plan and to talk about it. Would you come to that meeting? And then at that meeting, what's the next step? Because we'll say, hey, you're willing to serve, and somebody will say, yeah, I'm willing to serve, and then we don't have a plan for it. We don't have the next step. And so people kind of fall through the cracks, and we wonder why we don't have enough volunteers. It may be because we're not good at asking. It may also be because we didn't have that next step, and they didn't know what to do, and they got frustrated because they're busy like everybody else. So inspires action. So here's the mission plus core values plus bold dreams equals vision. Know your mission, know your core values, and then bold dreams equal vision. Do you have a planning style? What will your contribution look like in your community or your city? We'll come back to that a little more. Who are you becoming as a ministry or a mission in your organization? So one of the things that happens one of the things that happened to me personally was that I worked with Young Life, and I started a local Young Life club at a high school when I was 19, and and did that for 10 years. Was faithful there. Added, kind of grew into what they called an area director. I had part of the city of Scottsdale, and then I ended up doing the state of Arizona. And then we moved to Los Angeles, and I had the West Coast. And so eventually I was senior vice president for the Western U.S. and Asia. And I realized kind of over a period of time, that all of my energy was going to perpetuating the organization and trying to grow the organization. It wasn't being spent doing real ministry for me, what I love to do. And I was fundraising and trying to keep the organization going. But what I really wanted to do was be back into ministry. So that's when my wife and I decided, you know what, we're gonna leave Young Life and go into the church, because I want to finish the race with my feet on the ground, doing ministry with people, caring, all that. And that's when we made our transition. And that kind of helped us because we wanted to finish like that. We didn't want, churches sometimes, even like our church, we recognized that we had begun a little bit inward focused, that we were worried too much about the people that were there and how do we keep the people that are there rather than really focusing on the people we're trying to reach. And I think every 5 years, we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to really take a hard look at ourselves and say, have we become inward? Are we just focused on the people that are already here and we've got our little group? Or are we really still focused on who God's called us to reach and the mission that He's called us to do? So what singular impact will your mission have as years unfold? When I asked this question, something happened. I invited a few pastors to come to my office, and I invited somebody from the city of Scottsdale to come, and I asked this person, how can we serve the city? And Scottsdale in the Phoenix area is considered really affluent, and so you feel silly saying, how can we serve you, because you're Scottsdale, for goodness sakes, you don't need anything. And this young woman said that all over parts of Scottsdale, we have elderly people. Maybe they've lived in this house for 50 years. They're on a fixed income. And if they don't keep up their yards and the paint on their houses, then it's my job to go and give them a warning. And then if they don't fix it, then I put a sticker on their house saying, you're fined by the city of Scottsdale for not keeping your yard up and your house up. And so I was thinking about my own mother, who was on a fixed income. What would she do? Would she say, well, I'm not going to buy food for a month so I can get my yard fixed up, or I'm not going to buy my medicines for a month so I can get my yard fixed up. They're stuck. And so this young woman was telling us that it's my job to go and put that sticker on their door and find them. And she burst into tears saying, it's horrible, these people, these elderly people. So I said to her, look, here's the thing. You don't have to ever find anybody again, an elderly person again. You just give us their address and we got it. We'll take care of it. And then it kind of grew to, well, we've got a family with a child with a disability and they've gotten behind and we're going to find them. You don't have to do that. Just give us their address and we have it. But it came out of how are we going to have an impact? Will our mission have an impact in the years ahead? What's the big need in the community? And we actually discovered something in the city that was a huge need, and we changed the way the city operated. They don't find elderly people anymore. They give us their addresses, and we go take care of it for them. And we don't hand out cards with the church name. We just go in the name of Jesus and serve them. But we have this amazing relationship with the city because we thought about how we're going to have an impact. Many mission leaders are looking for success models rather than vision processes. So here's what we do. We buy curriculum, we buy programs, we go to conferences. I don't know what kind of conferences you guys have, but we just have them. You could go to another conference every week in the States, and they're all awesome, and they all are selling their products, and you could buy all kinds of programs and all kinds of products. The question is, does it fit your mission? Does it fit your vision? Is it what you're best equipped to do? And you've got to make those decisions first, then look for ways that you can enhance those and help them. It's been said that vision without execution is a daydream, and execution without vision is a nightmare. So we need to know what we want to accomplish, right? Okay, and we don't have to spend a lot of time in this. This is in the outline notes, but let me just quickly, you craft a vision statement, but it's not meaningful enough to talk about. So we kind of do it to say we did it, but then it goes on a shelf. We never look at it. It doesn't drive what we do. And if you're going to do a mission and a statement like that, a vision statement, it needs to propel your ministry. You need to be passionate about, here's what God's called us to do. Here's what He's equipped us to do. Here's what it's going to be meaningful in the city. Here's how we're going to go and make disciples. And I can't wait to get up in the morning so I can get after this. That's one little personal test is what gets me up in the morning, right? And I'm so excited to get after what God's called us to do and what He's equipped us to do. You have a vision with no time frame for accomplishing it. If you're going to set goals, the two things you have to have in a goal is it's got to be measurable and it's got to be dated. You got to have a date that you want to accomplish it. I always tell our staff, I go through goals every 6 months. Our staff, I meet one-on-one with our staff, and we go through their 6-month goals. And I tell them if it doesn't have a date and if you can't measure it, it's not a real goal. So let's talk about what God's calling you to do. And always our mission is printed at the top of the deal, and then we talk about their goals. And the thing that really helps is that I'm not evaluating them. I'm looking at what they said they wanted to do. They said they believed God was calling them to do within the context of our mission and vision. And so I'm saying, well, okay, you didn't get any of those done. Were they bad goals? Did it change somehow? What happened that you didn't get those done? And they're kind of evaluating themselves, and we're reworking it and reframing it to help everybody move forward. People who like to dream and people who do things are rarely on the same page. So you get people that love to dream and think and plan, but then you get people that are the execution people, and how do you pull them together and honor all of them? People don't see the vision as important to their ministry. That's why a shared vision is so critical. The planning tool is so complicated. How you get there is so complicated that people don't finish it. A vision that doesn't get people excited, it doesn't catch their hearts. A plan that's too rigid and poor follow-up, there's no accountability. So those are some things that keep us from accomplishing. All right, 5 more questions. What are we doing? That's mission. Who are we going to be as we do it? States our values that I don't want to lose my soul. I don't want to lose my heart in this. to get a task done, but it's coming out of my relationship with Christ, and that's a high value for me. How are we doing it? That's our strategy. When are we successful? How do we know that we've done it? Let me just say this, that success is a byproduct of having a vision and good goals. Success is never a goal. I don't have a goal to be successful, but success is the result of focusing on my mission and vision and my plan and getting that done, and success follows that. But when we make a goal of being successful, then talk about a moment that's really about us. That's really about just impressing. That's really just about, numbers or, whatever it is, and it's not really getting the mission done that God's called us to do. Where's God taking us? Where's God leading us? So that's part. Okay, now moving to knowing where you are matters. And so you guys are in really different contexts, but what are the three greatest needs in your community? Can you identify those three greatest needs? I had breakfast with a young guy this morning, and they're in a small church, but they have a daycare center that really reaches a lot of people in their community. They're trying to figure out how they're going to address the needs in their community. So we try to address a need in the elderly community in our city. What are some of the three greatest needs in our community? What are the three greatest needs within a half mile of your church or your organization? And how do we think about that? How do we look at that? Biggest changes in your community, largest community events in your area that you can help with. Is there a sense of urgency about anything going on in your community? Anything with kids, children? That's always a big one. What are the people in your ministry passionate about? So we have two little mission organizations that popped up from our church because it was the passion of some people in our church. So we have a mission organization called Fuel the Mission because we had some builders that said, how can we serve the body of Christ? So they've gone all over the world and built schools and churches and things out of our church because they had a passion for that. And so we help them. How do we help them realize that and work with that? Real quickly, building a visionary ministry is 1% vision and 99% alignment. Can we align our church with what we believe God called us to do? Could a visitor drop into your church or ministry and infer your vision from the operations and activity there without ever reading it on paper? Can they feel it and see it? We want to make disciples. We want to do it in a relational way. So we recognize the fact that when people come into our church, they often make a decision about whether or not they're going to come back before there's ever a song played or a sermon given. If they come in and nobody welcomes them, nobody says hello, nobody helps them find the seat, find where to put their kids, any of those things, then they're probably not going to come back. And so our goal is that when somebody walks up to our door, they get touched 3 times before they ever sit down. That they get met at the door, they get help checking in their children if they need it, they get help getting directed to our little cafe where there's coffee and donuts and things, they get help to a seat. And so before they sit down and the service starts, somebody knows their name, somebody's greeted them, they've been touched 3 times before they ever sit down. And I think that's just critical. I used to tell people when I was doing Young Life, if I walked into a Young Life club and 10 minutes before the meeting was going to start, if the musicians were still practicing, I would tell them, break it up, stop, because you didn't prepare, you didn't think about this, that 30 minutes before the meeting, you should be welcoming kids. That's your job. So at our church, our worship team, we have a commitment that at least once a month, 30 minutes before the service, they're out in the lobby welcoming people. That's part of their ministry, part of their role, but it means they've got to be prepared and planned to do that. That's just one of our values. All right, real fast. Goals, specific, measurable, action-oriented. This is from a business coach named Michael Hyatt, and time-sensitive, exciting, relevant. He used to be SMART goals, he just added 2 more, but basically exciting and relevant. as we think about goals. So as I mentioned, I sit down every 6 months with our staff team and help them think through their goals. I do it in 6 months because you can get things done in 6 months, but it stays fresh in your mind. It's not something you do annually and put on a shelf and forget, but you're thinking about, okay, how is my role going to work through, and how am I going to stay focused on that? All right? But I'm going to fly through this because I've got like no time left. I've got a whole bunch, it's in your notes, it's in the outline on volunteers, because that seems to be a universal challenge in churches and in organizations. Where do we find volunteers? How do we help volunteers? And how do we fill those needs? So we have different kinds of volunteers. We have leaders who make things run. We have operations people to make them run smoothly. We have curriculum program people who love to work on those things. So we use curriculum that we buy, but then we have people that rewrite it to fit our context in our church, and that's what they love to do. Jay loves curriculum. He loves to fine-tune things like that. So we all use our gifts and use our strengths to help in that way. Teachers prepared and gifted to serve, relational leaders prepared to connect with people. We think about all of those categories that we need to make things work, and sometimes one person can do multiple things. You know, you don't have 1,000 volunteers to help you get everything done, but if you think strategically about what am I asking people to do, and am I helping them get it done? Consider who's filling each of the roles now in your ministry. Can help you figure out what kind of people are needed and where the holes or the gaps are so you can fill. Notice that not every role includes direct contact with children or adults. So we had this young couple and they're engineers, and actually she has a PhD in statistics. Never heard of that, but she does. And he's an engineer, and they said, we want to serve. And I said, we have a need with third graders in our church. And so they went 1 week and came back just scared out of their mind, saying, I don't think we can do. And so they help in our hospitality and getting coffee and all that, and they just love it. And they've been doing it for a few years now, and it's really their ministry and it's where they fit. But it was sort of helping them figure out what was a good fit, and then thanking them, praising them for it, celebrating with them. As leaders, we're horrible celebrators sometimes, right? That we get volunteers and then we're just so glad to have that spot filled, and we have so many other things to do that we don't come back and celebrate what God's done. Celebrate that person who's loving third grade girls and doing such a wonderful job of caring for them, and she's so faithful. She deserves our thanks, right? So we have a party every year for our volunteers, and we have a big dinner, and the staff serves it, and we do fun things, and just a big celebration. But I'm a big one on handwriting thank you notes too. That's sort of a lost art because everybody emails or texts, and I just think sometimes people need to get a handwritten thank you note. Thank you, because I know you're serving, and I've taken the time to get a card, to write in it, to put it in the mail to you, because what you're doing is so valuable. So we need to thank people. Where's your pool of volunteers? Where do you draw your volunteers from? Talk about that with people. Is everyone on your staff team, and you may not have a staff team, so I recognize that, but is everyone on your staff recruiting out of the same pool? Are you asking the same person to do 3 different things? Do you as a team, if you've got more than one person on your staff, are you talking about that? Where are we recruiting? Who are we talking? Can we collaborate? Maybe I realize that somebody else needs that person more than I do. I'm willing to let them serve there. How do you do that? All right. Who's the best recruiter? Sometimes you got to think about who's the best asker, who's the most appropriate. So we've had situations where somebody in our preschool and nursery area says, pastoral area, would you ask this person to help? Because I think they would be great, but I don't know them very well. You know them better. Would you ask them? And so I'll go ask that person for them because I'm really committed to the preschool and nursery. I have 9 grandkids. I should be committed to preschool and nursery. Do you have a clear and positive appeal to those you're trying to recruit, and always have a next step ready? What's the next step? come to this meeting, here's some stuff we're doing. The easiest way to kill enthusiasm is to create it and then give people nothing to do. It's critical when someone says yes, or even if they're interested, that there's a path for them to get involved. Volunteers are leaders in training. People own what they help create. What I said, they keep the mission in view as we keep the mission in view as we build people. Information is gold. If people don't know the calendar, if people don't know what's happening in the church, if they don't have the right kind of information, we just frustrate them because they have lives. And so when they find out something has changed, well, we were going to do something on this date, but it's been changed to that date, and the people most important, our volunteers, don't know that, then we just frustrate them. And there's a reason why they stop serving, because they're frustrated with us. Don't waste their time. If you have a meeting, know that time is precious to people, and don't waste their time. Start it on time, end it when you say, have a plan for it, but don't waste anybody's time. Don't get defensive. Things don't go well. Be patient. Match your volunteers strategically. Provide consistent, regular feedback. All right. Celebrate and honor. Offer an out clause. So sometimes people don't volunteer because they think they're going to get trapped for the rest of their lives. And so typically it really helps if you say, would you help me from September to May, and then let's evaluate, see how it's doing. And then we kind of, we either go from there or we don't go from there. You can re-up or not. But people will be more willing to volunteer if they know there's a beginning and an end that they can evaluate. But they're not, if they say yes, they're not caught for the rest of their lives, doing something that may or may not be for what fits them. So I have some things on recruiting and nurturing volunteers, but I'm going to jump because I think I'm out of time, right? So this time is up. Please finish. Okay. So I can read too. All right. One thing that we don't do very well is evaluate and give feedback. And we need to get better at that. We just frustrate people if they don't sense that, they don't know if they're doing a good job, that maybe they need affirmation, maybe they need a little bit of help correcting, they need a little bit of training. But we want to have clear expectations and guidelines. People get frustrated because they don't know what it's expected of them. All right, let me just finish with this. Principle 3, what is leadership? Motivating people to do something with you they would have never done on their own. We can't truly lead others until we learn to lead ourselves. That's part of having a plan for your own walk with Christ. Humility and passion are critical. And here's one, great leaders are totally committed to the success of those under them. It's not your success that you're going after, it's the success of people underneath you. How do I encourage them? How do I build them up? How do I help them to grow? And how do I serve them? So you don't have to worry about your own stuff if people are growing and doing well, all right? And then the last is, are you a good follower? Are you the kind of follower you would want on your team? I think before you can become a great leader, you've got to be a great follower. And so one of the questions you can ask yourself is, would I want me on my team? Am I a good follower? Or would I be really hard to lead? Well, shame on you, right? But before we can be great leaders, we need to be great followers. We're followers of Jesus.